I was really patient the whole match. Was going over the time since the first set, and I never said anything. I would look at the umpire, and she didn't do anything. And then obviously the crowd started to notice that she was taking long, so you would hear people in the crowd yelling time or, doing the watch.
Coco Gauff just broke her silence about the Laura Siegemund time violation controversy, and what she revealed is way more intense than what cameras showed. After staying quiet through an entire match while her opponent violated rules repeatedly, Coco finally snapped. And then Nigan's tearful press conference response made everything 10 times worse. Here's what actually happened that nobody's talking about. Real quick, when you're watching a match and one player is clearly stalling and breaking rules, but the umpire does nothing, at what point is it okay for the other player to speak up? Drop your take in the comments because this debate about sportsmanship is getting heated. Let's set the scene because the context here matters. This wasn't some random early round match where nobody was paying attention. This was the 2023 US Open first round at Arthur Ashe Stadium, the biggest tennis venue in the world with over 23,000 people watching. Coco Gauff playing in front of her home crowd facing Laura Siegemund, a crafty veteran known for, let's just say, unconventional tactics. It got to the point where she was doing it a lot on my serve, and my issue with that was the ref was calling the score like a couple seconds after the point was finished. So it made it look like I was serving abnormally fast. But that's where that was getting annoyed too. And it wasn't like we were having long rallies, so I was finally happy when the time violation came. But obviously on my serve I was like, she has to be ready when I'm serving, and from the very first set Siegemund was going over the time limit between points. Not occasionally, not accidentally, consistently. The WTA allows 25 seconds between points, that's the rule, everyone knows it, everyone's supposed to follow it. And Siegemund was breaking it over and over again while the chair umpire sat there doing absolutely nothing about it. Coco's own words after the match tell you everything. She said, "I was really patient the whole match. She was going over the time since the first set. I never said anything. I would look at the umpire and she didn't do anything." Think about that for a second. Coco noticed the violations immediately. She looked at the umpire expecting enforcement of a basic rule, and the umpire just ignored it. So Coco stayed quiet and kept playing, figuring eventually the umpire would do her job and call the violation extremely fast. But it kept happening set after set, point after point, and the crowd started noticing too. That's when things got interesting because you could hear people in the stands yelling time and doing that watch-tapping motion with their hands. 23,000 people could see what was happening. The broadcast announcers could see it. Everyone except apparently the chair umpire could see that Siegemund was blatantly violating the shot clock. Here's where it gets even more frustrating for Coco. She said, "It got to the point where she was doing it a lot on my serve. My issue with that was the ref was calling the score like a couple seconds after the point was finished, so it made it look like I was serving abnormally fast." Come on. So not only was Siegemund breaking the rules, she was specifically doing it when Coco was serving, which made Coco look like she was rushing through her service games. The umpire was calling the score late, which compressed the time Coco had to serve, and then Sai would take forever getting ready. It was a perfect storm of gamesmanship that made Coco look like the one causing problems when she was actually the victim of blatant rule violations. And Coco's team noticed too. She said later, "My team told me I should have spoke up earlier." Her own coaching team was sitting there watching this happen and telling her she needed to say something. But Coco, being 19 years old at the time and still relatively early in her career, didn't want to come off as a complainer or create drama. She wanted to just play tennis and win on merit, but eventually she reached her breaking point. She told the umpire she went over the clock about 4 times.
Point where she was doing it a lot on my serve, and my issue with that was the ref was calling the score like a couple seconds after the point was finished, so it made it look like I was serving abnormally fast. But that's where I was getting annoyed too, and it wasn't like we were having long rallies. So I was finally happy when the time violation came, but obviously on my serve I was like, she has to be ready when I'm.
You've given her a time violation once. How is this fair? I'm going at normal speed, I go at medium pace speed. When the umpire finally gave Seg a penalty point for a shot clock violation, not a warning, a penalty point. That's how egregious the violations had become. The umpire skipped straight past warnings and went directly to docking Siegemund to point. And you know what Sean's response was? She complained. She actually complained to the umpire that Coco was serving extremely fast, almost unreasonably fast, and that she needed more time to get ready. Let me break down how absurd that argument is. Coco was serving at a completely normal pace. The umpire was calling the score late, which made it seem fast, and even if Coco was serving quickly, that's completely legal. There's no rule about serving too fast. The server controls the pace of their service games. That's literally how tennis works. But Siegemund tried to flip the script and make it seem like Coco was the problem. That's elite-level gamesmanship. And honestly, it's infuriating to watch because what she's doing is trying to manipulate the umpire into thinking that Coco is being unreasonable when Siegemund is the one who's been breaking rules for 2 hours straight. Coco Gauff. Nothing easy about that match. Describe what it was like to play it. Slow? No. I mean it was a tough match. I wasn't playing my best tennis. Laura, she's not an easy opponent. She fights to the end, and that's what she did today. And you know I was able to overcome a lot of adversity, so I'm happy with how I played today or happy how I managed to get through. After the match, Coco explained her thought process during all of this, and it's genuinely revealing about the pressure young athletes face. She said, I really don't like confrontation all that much. I was thinking about it the whole match. I wasn't sure if I was in the right or not until it happened multiple times to open this set. I know, but it's the rules. He's not allowed to sit. Siegemund must have said something. So even though Coco knew the rules were being violated, even though her team was telling her to speak up, even though the crowd was noticing and reacting, she still doubted herself. She wasn't sure if she was in the right to call out what was happening. That's the mental burden young players carry. They're so worried about being labeled as difficult or immature that they second-guess themselves even when they're objectively correct. She continued, I didn't want to come off as a complainer. Sometimes being in the public image, you think about all these actions that don't have to do with tennis, like talking with the ref, throwing the racket, banging the racket. It's stuff that I think about. Honestly, that's incredibly mature self-awareness for a 19-year-old. She's thinking about optics and public perception in the middle of a high-pressure Grand Slam match. She's worried that if she says something to the umpire, people will call her names and tear her down. And sadly, she's probably right to worry about that because female athletes get criticized way more harshly than male athletes for the exact same behavior. But here's what makes Coco's response so impressive. She said, today I think it was important to show you can do all this, still stick to your ground, and people are going to respect you. I think as long as you approach a person with respect, then everything should be fine. She handled it perfectly. She waited until the violations were undeniable. She expressed her frustration clearly and directly without yelling or losing control. She stood her ground when the umpire tried to brush her off, and she did it all while maintaining composure and respect. That's championship-level maturity. Now let's talk about Laura Siegemund's response, because this is where things get really messy. After losing the match, she held a press conference where she
Come on, Laura Siegemund!
Broke down crying. And the reason she was crying wasn't because she lost a tough match, it was because she felt the crowd treated her unfairly. It's the first time I'm crying in a press conference. As a tennis player, you are a performer, you owe the people, you owe the kids that watch. And I'm just a bit, at the end of the day, I go home and I can look at myself and I can say I did a great job, but did I get anything from the people for that? Even less than a 0, because they treated me bad. Like they treated me like I was a cheater, like I was trying, sneaky ways to win this match or something. They treated me like I was a bad person. But there are people who throwing rackets, who are screaming, who are making bad gestures toward the audience. I did not one moment in the whole match, and there was a lot of tension going on. Not one moment I did anything. I was just slow. And that's something in the rule. I get my time violation. That's fine. No, I don't know. She said, it's the first time I'm crying in a press conference. As a tennis player, you're a performer. You owe the people, you owe the kids that watch. At the end of the day, I can go home and I can look at myself and I can say, I did a great job, but did I get anything from the people for that? It feels pretty much like a flat 0, even less than a 0, because they treated me bad. Okay, let's unpack this. Siegemund is upset that the Arthur Ashe crowd didn't appreciate her performance. She feels like they treated her like a cheater and like she was trying sneaky ways to win the match, and she's crying about it in a press conference. Okay, let's unpack this. Sai is upset that the Arthur Ashe crowd didn't appreciate her performance. She feels like they treated her like a cheater and like she was trying sneaky ways to win the match, and she's crying about it in a press conference. Here's the problem with that narrative. The crowd reacted negatively because she was breaking the rules repeatedly in front of 23,000 people. They weren't treating her badly for no reason. They were frustrated because they could see what was happening and the umpire wasn't doing anything about it. That's not unfair treatment, that's accountability. Siegemund continued, they treated me like I was a bad person, but there are people who are throwing rackets, who are screaming, who are making bad gestures towards the audience. I did not one moment in the whole match do anything. I was just slow. This is where the victimhood narrative falls apart completely. Yes, she didn't throw her racket or scream. Great. That's the bare minimum of professional behavior, but being just slow is a violation of the rules. You don't get credit for not throwing your racket while simultaneously breaking shot clock rules for 2 hours. And the fact that she's comparing herself to players who have emotional outbursts is telling. She's trying to position herself as the calm, composed professional who got treated unfairly. But the reality is she was employing gamesmanship tactics that frustrated both her opponent and the crowd. And then she's crying about facing consequences for those choices. The other element here that's worth examining is the contrast in how these two players handled the situation. Coco stayed
Coco Gauff, nothing easy about that match. Describe what it was like to play it.
Slow. It was a tough match. I wasn't playing my best tennis. Laura, she's not an easy opponent. She fights to the end, and that's what she did today. I was able to overcome a lot of adversity, so I'm happy with how I played today, or happy how I managed to get through.
After the match, Coco explained her thought process during all of this, and it's genuinely revealing about the pressure young athletes face. She said, "I really don't like confrontation all that much. I was thinking about it the whole match. I wasn't sure if I was in the right or not until it happened multiple times."
To open this set.
I know, but it's the rules. He's not allowed to sit.
Siegemund must have said something.
Posed during the match, expressed her concerns respectfully, won the match, and then gave a thoughtful interview about the experience. Siegemund violated rules repeatedly, complained when she got penalized, lost the match, and then cried in a press conference about how the crowd didn't appreciate her. One of those responses shows maturity and accountability. The other shows a refusal to accept responsibility for your own actions. Fast forward to 2025 and Coco and Siegemund are scheduled to play each other again at the Wuhan Open. And when asked about the matchup, Coco kept it simple and diplomatic. She said Siegemund is a very tricky player, very experienced. It will be another tough match. That's class. Coco could have taken that opportunity to throw shade or reference the US Open drama. Instead, she acknowledged Siegemund's skill and moved on. That's how champions handle uncomfortable situations. They don't dwell on past conflicts, they focus on the next challenge. But here's why this story matters beyond just one match in 2023. It reveals something important about the challenges young athletes face, especially young women in sports. Coco was being taken advantage of by a veteran player using gamesmanship tactics, and her first instinct was to doubt herself and stay quiet because she didn't want to be seen as difficult. That's not okay. Players shouldn't have to worry about public perception when they're simply asking for rules to be enforced. Umpires shouldn't ignore blatant violations just because they don't want to deal with confrontation, and veteran players shouldn't exploit younger opponents' reluctance to speak up. The fact that Coco eventually found her voice and stood up for herself is great, but she shouldn't have had to. The system should have worked correctly from the beginning. The umpire should have called the violations immediately, and Siegemund should have followed the rules in the first place. This situation also highlights a double standard in tennis. When male players argue with umpires, it's seen as passion and competitiveness. When female players do it, they get called emotional and difficult. Coco was incredibly conscious of that double standard during the match, which is why she second-guessed herself so much before finally speaking up. And even after handling it perfectly, Siegemund still tried to flip the narrative and paint herself as the victim. That's manipulative. And it's exactly the kind of behavior that makes young players reluctant to advocate for themselves. The good news is Coco went on to win that US Open, becoming a Grand Slam champion at 19 years old. She proved that you can stand up for yourself, handle confrontation with grace, and still win the biggest tournaments in the world. That's a powerful message for young athletes everywhere. But the Laura Siegemund time violation drama will always be remembered as a defining moment in Coco's career. The moment she learned that being right isn't enough. You also have to be willing to speak up for yourself even when it's uncomfortable. So that's the full story behind Coco Gauff exposing Laura Siegemund's time violations and the tearful press conference that followed. If this breakdown gave you the complete picture, hit that like button and subscribe for more real tennis analysis. Drop your take in the comments. Was Coco right to speak up, or should she have stayed quiet? And remember, sometimes standing up for yourself is the most important.